This video is going to be a very loose, rambling essay about another golf game, with some additional thoughts on golf, video games, and art more broadly. It'll include almost no gameplay or content from another golf game itself, mostly because I think it's the kind of thing where even small spoilers really rob you of the intended playing experience. The majority of the footage will instead be a series of golf-adjacent game prototypes cobbled together in an unreleased version of a different video game that I've been contributing to and co-developing for the past year and a half, called The Museum of You. The majority of that content you'll see will likely never make it into any future playable releases. The audio is a combination of voiceover like this and in-game narration, though the line between the two gets a bit blurred. We'll start off in a currently unreleased section called The Hall of Honor, a place intended to highlight some of the games and other pieces of media that directly inspire or indirectly connect to the Museum of You. Another golf game by Waxy Caps is the latest addition to this hall.
It's nice to make something where I finally know the point that I want to get across. I know what I want to say.
I, Justin, first played another golf game long after the majority of the Museum of You was created or conceived, or at least that's true as of mid-2026 at the time of this recording. So it doesn't exactly fall into the category of influence, the way a lot of this hall's inclusions do. Instead, it was more of a mirror that I saw myself and the museum in when first playing. A sort of kindred spirit that felt like a reflection of something that's been rattling around my brain for a while. I think the very same thing I tried to distill, bottle, and convey in this museum project. It's a very different kind of game, but I'd like to think there's a lot of overlap in some of the underlying philosophy. Another golf game is a strange, minimalist, immersive sim that brilliantly captures the essence of golf in a unique way. I paradoxically loved and hated playing it in exactly the way I hope, but rarely expect, to see people experience the Museum of You. A huge thank you to Waxy Caps for creating this, and for sharing it with the world so I could feel a little less alone in my pursuit of making people play unplayable video games. If this haul ever makes it into the released version of the museum, the commentary would likely end here. The tape would play that quick snippet acknowledging the game, and that'd be it. But for this video, I'd like to dig a little deeper. Let's take a look at what's behind this wall. An Other Golf Games creator describes the game as golf without the hard parts removed. This is intended to be the complete opposite. Go ahead and pick up the ball and place it in the hole ahead. What you just played could very generously be called a golf video game. It has grass, a flag, you put the ball in the hole. What more could you want? There's a lot of golf games out there that boil down to the same essentials, but despite being an enjoyer of both video games and golf, none of them have really ever appealed to me. That is, until I found another golf game. Go ahead and start hole 2. Voice over me again. I want you to think back to the first hole of this so-called golf game. Did you enjoy it? I can't imagine you did. It's tediously simple, contains far too much instruction and handholding, has a terrible sense of pacing with the short length and constant pauses, and ultimately the payoff is deeply unsatisfying. Probably because you didn't do anything of substance to earn it. It preserves nothing about the essence of golf and feels like a waste of time. This is a hyperbolic representation of what most golf games feel like to me personally, and maybe a complaint I have about a lot of video games as a whole. Nothing against the many well-made golf games out there, or the people who do enjoy them. I'm just saying they're not for me. It feels like they're missing a core element that makes real golf appealing. The fact that playing it is a humiliating, fury-inducing experience that we only put up with because it very occasionally leads to a payoff so satisfying that it somehow makes up for the psychological torture learning the game incurs. Another golf game is the only one I've ever seen that really gets this aspect right. And the result is a uniquely fun yet frustrating experience that is stuck deep in my brain. Let's go to the next hole.
Test audio for test subtitle.
One thing I really love about Another Golf Game is that it aggressively avoids the common video game pitfall of needlessly spoon-feeding its players information. You can almost imagine its creator asking themselves, what is the most annoying, least playable golf game I can trick people into playing? It has no tutorial, it gives the player almost no information. This is a game ostensibly about golf, yet the vast majority of time is spent doing anything but golfing. There are no instructions, little obvious story, the controls are difficult to parse, and the early game is painfully slow. It's not uncommon to spend your first several hours of gameplay driving around before you catch your first glimpse of the course. You may even run out of gas or die of hunger several times before you hit your first ball. I didn't locate my first save point until 5 or 6 hours deep into playing, meaning I played the beginning over and over again, like a strange golf-based Stanley Parable. Once you're finally at the course, you have to work tedious, hard-to-decipher jobs that pay barely enough to afford microwaved burritos, let alone golf clubs and greens fees. It took me days of staging carts and picking up stray range balls before I had even a half-full bag of clubs and enough money to try the course, a round which I promptly quit within the first few holes. In my first 50 hours of playing, I spent less than 5% of that time playing golf, and the one friend I've convinced to join me in this strange playing experience has done about the same. I might play another 100 hours of this game before I get close to matching any of my real-life scores. In a world full of games that make difficult things seem easy, this one somehow captured and amplified exactly what makes golf so difficult, and then extended it to every aspect of in-game existence. It's kind of beautiful. In the real world, I've been golfing for most of my life. I'm alright at it, but for the most part, I got to my current skill level when I was a teenager and more or less plateaued ever since. I still enjoy it, especially going out with friends who are newer, so I can see their improvement and sort of live vicariously through them hitting new milestones and breaking personal records. But when I think about my own lack of progress, I feel a lot of nostalgia for when I was a beginner. I was a much worse golfer, but I could see my improvements more clearly. And there was always another milestone or a better version of myself just over the horizon. Another golf game taps into that feeling perfectly, creating a place where I get to feel the joy and frustration of learning golf all over again, a nostalgic experience only heightened by the aesthetics of this low-poly stylized game that feels plucked from my childhood. And to compound that nostalgia, the world feels set in the exact era I remember as a kid starting golf in the mid-2000s, down to the specific club models for sale in the pro shop that visually reference the models that I remember being popular then. In an odd way, I think playing this game has made me enjoy golf a bit more too. To dive into that, I might need to zoom out a bit from Another Golf Game and visit a few tangents. What you're seeing on your screen now is an out-of-bounds section accessible from the first main gallery in the Museum of You, which you can find if you follow a green light that glows through a hidden crack in a wall. After jumping from block to block, you eventually end up at a larger platform surrounded by a chopped-up version of the short story that inspired this game, the world's least playable video game. In this version, I've replaced the glowing blocks with grass to lazily turn it into another golf aesthetic game, and I've added a short essay that I wrote about golf to the final platform. That essay is called Golf is Evil, The Banana Putter Isn't. I wrote both of these long before stumbling on another golf game, but I think they're deeply connected to the reasons that that game speaks to me. Starting with the essay, it's a sort of tongue-in-cheek confession that golf is, regrettably, a guilty pleasure of mine. I've spent most of my adult life presenting as someone more likely to protest the opening of a golf course than to actively participate in the sport. I feel a sort of Jekyll and Hyde-esque inner conflict being an edgy underground Berkeley artist with an alter ego who occasionally dons polo and slacks in secret to hit the course and rub elbows with high society types, playing a sport inexorably tied to environmental harm and a racist, sexist, classist history. How do I make peace with that? Like most sources of cognitive dissonance, I ignore it and embrace absurdity. I mostly play public courses with working class friends and poke fun at the conservative traditionalists and fratty bro dudes to pretend I'm not like them. And I bury my enjoyment of golf in irony by making things like the Banana Putter, a club I jokingly say is sponsored by Chiquilla Banana and the various democratic governments they've overthrown. The politics here aren't really the point. The point is that in order to play golf these days, I have to turn it into a sort of layered, ironic exercise in absurdity to mask my earnest enjoyment of it. And intentionally or not, another golf game taps into this incredibly well. A golf game where it takes forever to find the course and the golfing itself feels almost impossible at the start? Hilarious. A golf game where instead of golfing, you can just get hammered and drive around blasting music? Genius. Dada would approve. A golf game where every little task is turned into a puzzle that feels like a metaphor for the specific kind of frustration learning to golf universally inspires? Yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing that the person who wrote that silly golf essay would love. I feel I've already spent too much time self-indulgently talking about myself, so I'm going to try to keep this next part short, but it should be pretty obvious why another golf game reminded me of this story I wrote, the world's least playable video game. I love art that bends and breaks the cardinal rules of whatever medium it's presented in, and for a long time I've been obsessed with the idea of a video game that ignores the general accepted principle of making your game playable, or fun, or a game in a traditional sense. This story and the resulting museum-based game it inspired was intended to explore a number of ideas around art, the creative process, and the very human desire to be known or understood. It's a very lonely game in a way. Even though I co-developed it with someone else, we mostly stuck to our own levels and worked asynchronously while living in different states. And I think that loneliness shows through to the end product. The game constantly pushes the player away, as if to say, I wouldn't blame you if you quit now. I know this is a miserable experience. And yet it desperately asks the same player to stay and tries to offer them just enough to keep them around. I don't want to say that's exactly what another golf game is going for, but when I was first playing it, I couldn't help but feel something so very similar. But where the Museum of You has a sadness in its loneliness and unplayability, another golf game feels like it inspires joy. There was an incredible delight I felt when realizing the sound effects and different characters were all voiced by the same solo developer. Sometimes I'd get stuck figuring something out and imagine the creator laughing as they designed that bit, envisioning the exact frustrating scenario I felt myself in, and I felt a sort of connection. In that way, being a solo developer isn't so lonely. When someone plays your game and gets something valuable out of it, it feels a bit like a conversation. The player listens to what you had to say with your game, and then brings their own perspective and personal context to it, and together, you make something new. In a sense, all art is collaborative, and I really like it when a piece of media reminds me of that the way another golf game does. I have one more tangent before landing on a sort of final point of this video, if you'll indulge me for a bit of semi-philosophical art rambling. I have a question for you to consider. What exactly is a painting? I'm not qualified to give an authoritative answer, But to me, a painting at its core is an abstraction of a subject that preserves a meaningful perspective. I have a feeling that's not a common answer. Most people would probably opt for a definition that includes the word paint or image in it, but I hope you'll stick with me here. The particulars of all three components, abstraction, subject, perspective, can vary wildly. But when I think of paintings and how they function as art or mimetic packages of information, it's those three that really come to mind. The abstraction element can be anything from a photorealistic approach to Rothko-esque minimalism. You take an infinitely detailed ideal of an image and break it up into component shapes, colors, values, etc. that the viewer can then resolve into a unique mental version of that original image. The subject can be a real-world landscape, or a person, or a fictional scene, or an intangible concept. The perspective could literally be the angle and composition the subject is viewed from, or the sum total of the artist's unique thoughts and experiences that were poured into the piece. In this way, I think you could say a digital drawing could be a painting. Maybe a very intentionally taken photograph. Maybe some sculptures fit this broad definition. Taken to the extreme, I think another golf game is a brilliant painting of golf. In the same way that impressionists or surrealists or minimalists or even caricaturists can sometimes capture the essence of a subject more faithfully than a photorealistic rendering, I think another golf game captures the true essence of golf in a way more complex or realistic golf games can't. The abstraction comes in the form of low-poly renderings and obtuse control schemes, as well as the choice to force players to spend most of their time not golfing just to survive and play the game. It's not literally an accurate representation of golf, but it is spiritually accurate. The subject isn't just golf as an aesthetic, but the deeper emotional core that the game is built on. The perspective is a nostalgic preservation of a particular moment in time just old enough to be identifiable as the past, and the fond memories of learning to play in that time. It's an abstract, impressionistic portrait of golf, and it's become one of my favorite paintings of anything I've ever encountered. I think this is a bit of a different take on the now tired argument about whether video games can be art. The answer to which I think almost everyone has settled on being a resounding yes. There's a now infamous essay by acclaimed film reviewer Roger Ebert that argues the opposite. In it, he states the following. One obvious difference between art and games is that you can win a game. It has rules, points, objectives, and an outcome. Others might cite an immersive game without any points or rules, but I would say that it ceases to be a game and then becomes a representation of a story, a novel, a play, dance, a film. Those are things you cannot win. You can only experience them. I don't agree with Roger's conclusion, but I think there's a pearl of wisdom in this quote. Golf is not a game you can win, and neither is another golf game. You can only experience them. And in doing so, you just might find something of value being said about life, yourself, and golf.